Hey everybody, this is Perch, and a little different this week. Instead of a complete live stream, it's a live-ish stream. But my guest today, Sean Murphy. How are you?
Hey man, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a full-time listener, second-time caller.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us or joining us. Yeah, I guess there's some virtual audience will eventually show up, but it's great to have you. The chat I did with you is still one of my favorites that I've done. It was just, and I think it's one of those silly things. I remember where I was when the video went out, and I was listening to it, and I'm watching kind of the chat that we did at the time of the people who were listening to it. It was just a great moment. So thank you again for doing that, and thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, no, man, I'm dying for real information and real analysis in comics, and there's just such a lack thereof. And when I came across your podcast, I don't know, maybe more than a year ago now, like I liked you before it was cool, I can claim. And I'm like, this is great. Like, even if this, and I didn't know if you were right or wrong, but even if he's not correct, at least he's saying the right kinds of things, and he's having the conversation that no one else seems to want to have in comics. Like, to even talk about the business in the depth that you do is heresy at comic book parties. And I don't understand why, So I just learned to keep my mouth shut over the years, and I found your podcast. I'm like, awesome. This guy's having the conversation that I want to have.
That's all. And I'm wrong all the time, certainly. I think, but you don't learn anything or push it forward unless you're talking. I mean, we gotta solve this thing. It's not. There are a lot of great things and bad things in comics. It doesn't do anybody any good to ignore either side of it. So
yeah, exactly. And I have my own ignorance. I'm still trying to learn things I should know. Like, I really didn't understand how Diamond really worked until the pandemic hit, and then I thought, well, I should just dive in and figure out. I at least need to have like a verified opinion on this and do my research. And as I started looking into like just the very basics of how Diamond works, I started talking about it with my creator friends, and not only did they not know this, but they really didn't even show any signs of giving a shit,
Yeah.
And to me, that's just baffling. Like, dude, this is the thing that puts food on the table. Like, why wouldn't you want to know why Diamond is the way it is and why it might be broken,
Well, I agreed, and it is a small industry. So the thing that strikes me is there's a lot of opportunity for people to change it. Like, this isn't a huge, unmovable monolith. If people want to come in and change things and adapt things, I think people have the power to do it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we are small and scrappy enough. We all know each other. If we wanted to make a hard U-turn at any point, we probably could.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe with now that we're owned by AT&T and Disney, maybe it's a little harder, but we don't seem to make enough money to even register on their radar for the most part.
They're largely leaving you to your devices. I mean, the part, and I mean, what I see out of DC and Marvel, for that matter, right now is what they really want to have working is getting the pipeline of IP and characters translated for other media. Yeah. And if that part's working really well and they've got a good system, I think there's lots of leeway to make changes and do different things.
Yeah, I hope so, man. And that's why I'm really glad that you're bringing this stuff up. I hope, I don't know who your contacts are in the industry. I'm not asking you to tell me, but I hope that you're connected to some people that are really high up who can actually affect change, because, even when I try to, shake the ladder, I don't always find that it's as easy to make change as I would like it to be. You know what I mean?
It's hard as individuals. I'm not nearly connected enough, but I mean, you talk to people. The frustrating part is there is oftentimes a sense of kind of resignation. Like, it has always been this way. It's too hard to change. Let's just hunker down and survive it together. And and hopefully that can adapt. I don't know. There's some positions over at DC. Maybe I should apply. I'll put it my resume.
Yeah. Just don't say you're Perch. Don't say you're that guy with that successful YouTube channel that talks about.
I got to figure out how to bring them a digital strategy while leveraging none of the stuff I've talked about. Oh well, it's a funny little world. So we do this every week a little bit. What are you drinking? Are you drinking anything?
I'm drinking Scotch. I'm drinking Balvenie Doublewood, aged 17 years.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. I have it in a hidden bookshelf in my studio. I have like a little speakeasy thing where it's hidden and you push one book and it turns around. Like these things that they made in the 60s. They're cheap as fuck, but they're really nice. And I got one, so that's where I keep my secret stash when I'm working.
Oh, that's really nice. I need something like that. I've always wanted like a room in the house where there's the Scooby-Doo bookshelf that could actually
when Fiona, what are you drinking? Sorry.
Oh, so I'm drinking this Maker's Mark whiskey. It's cheaper whiskey, but it's on the rocks, and it's the right way to spend a
nice,
early afternoon.
Yeah. Now, I remember when I got into whiskey that this is before bourbon had lobbied to protect proper bourbon, i.e., made from water from Kentucky. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then they changed the rules so that you can actually make bourbon in other states now.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's not the same because Maker's Mark comes off the same shelf, like rock ledge shelf underground, where the best water is supposed to come from, according to people in that region.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm getting schooled in whiskey here.
No, I'm not. I'm asking.
No, I think you're right. I'm embarrassed now. I know far little. I drink, but I don't know enough about what I'm drinking, which is embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, because like Makers and Knob, you can find anywhere. So people are like, I've seen that everywhere. Like, give me some really high end bourbon. So you can get some bourbon, but it's made in Tennessee. And I'm like, not to be a snob, but gun to my head, if you're going to say, well, what's wrong with this picture? It's like, well, you can't really have high end $100 bottle bourbon from Tennessee. That kind of breaks the rule. It's like making champagne in France. It legally has to be from the Champagne region. Whereas in the US, we're like, fuck it, we make it in Seattle. Fuck you, France.
They do, yeah. Right about 10 miles from my house. There's the Woodinville Whiskey Company that puts this stuff out, and but it's not the same. And then further, I lived in Japan for about a year and a half straight, and that is a whole different whiskey over there.
Yeah. So I was gifted a bottle of 17-year-old Suntory whiskey from Japan. And I had no idea how valuable it was. It was from one of my friends who travels a lot, and he's very wealthy. So I took it to a party with my wife's friends, and I don't even know this friend of hers. And she was nice, and we ended up drinking the whole bottle together. And the next morning, she tries to go buy her own bottle, and it's a $700 bottle of fucking whiskey that I polished off with someone I don't even know. She's like, "Oh, is this what life is like when you're drawing comics?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, everyone can afford whiskey like this in comics."
It's high roller whiskey. Yeah. I did some. I had a really nice bottle as gift of Glenlivet that I did not digest how expensive that was as well. And I did a very similar story. Went to a friend's house, downed it. I think they were mixing it with lime juice at times, and it's like,
oh God, yeah.
Terrible.
My niece turned 21 recently, and I got her a bottle of Jefferson bourbon, but it's Jefferson Ocean. So it's traveled around the planet at least once, and the idea is that it's aged around the sea, so it has the hint of salt or what have you, right? And I told her, like, this is a very expensive bottle of bourbon. Do not mix this with Coca-Cola. I will disown you. Do not let your friends drink this unless they're good friends. Like, take this shit seriously.
I've had to do that many times. Don't buy like the sweet and sour mix at the grocery store and then put this, $300 whiskey and give it to you. And please, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's painful when you give alcohol, because we're in the holiday time, and it's a go-to gift for me. And I give somebody something like expensive wine, and then 3 months later I come back and they've like got it in their windowsill, like right.
Oh God.
I always want to take the bottle back. And
yeah, thanks for waving the "let's not be friends" flag, if that's how you're going to treat my high-end wine.
Exactly.
I was going to build a wine cellar in my basement at one point because I was going through a phase where I was a wine snob. And my wife, she likes wine, okay? And we get to this point where I'm like, why would I waste the wine that she doesn't seem to care about on her? I mean, and I love her, obviously. But I got her a box of, like, just a Boda box. And I'm not trying to disrespect my wife, but if I have like a 12-year-old bottle of Lebanese red wine that I know it's better than the other stuff, why would I waste a glass on her? And to her credit, she'll say, like, don't waste your good wine on me. So I'm like, okay, great. So then I bring her a Boda box. She's like, really? Like, what? You told me not to waste it on you. So now whenever I pour a bottle of wine, I get the hairy eyeball from her off in the corner of the room.
You went too far. See,
I know.
It's
sorry for listening to my wife.
I made the major mistake. My wife learned more about wine as we went on, but early when I was married, I had brought up an expensive bottle of red wine, and she's like wanting to do something with it. I wasn't thinking, and so she makes sangria with it, and this is like she's mixing it with orange Fanta and brandy, and it's like I'm looking at.
You're married to one of those. Okay, I see Perch.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking at it going. I brought up a 12-year bottle of wine. Like, wow, you just put a bunch of sugar in there.
Yeah.
I mean,
strike one, sweetheart.
Yeah, we went over to Spain and on a trip there, and that's where we first kind of came to the realization. Like sangria is typically where they take all the leftover remnant red wine and dump it into one bucket, and then that's what you're being served. So
no, it's the spam of wine. It's just crappy side meat that they, all the leftover parts of cows and pork. They just throw it all into a can or whatever and give it to the reserves.
It's so funny when I go into a restaurant and there's somebody's wanting to charge you like $20 for a glass of sangria, and you're like, nah, okay,
that's funny. When you go to comic conventions, I'm sure you've experienced this. Mostly I think it's a beer culture.
For sure.
If God forbid you have a glass of wine, everyone starts looking like, Mr. Fancy Pants, Mr. White Knight with his fucking red glass of wine. I'm like, really? Like, this is cheaper than your like micro brew, and you're giving me shit.
No, you're hitting it actually right. I'm many a night drinking the gas lamp at San Diego, and it's very much a beer culture. I think it's shifting to now the whiskey and harder alcohol, but because I do sense, like right before the pandemic hit last year, or I guess 2018, when I was down there, you're getting the sense that people had moved up in their alcohol, but had not moved up their tolerance for that alcohol. They're just getting wiped much faster.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. If it's just that a lot of pros don't have the budget for high end stuff, or maybe I don't know. I mean, when we go to shows, we're also deprived of social interaction that we all tend to go overboard because we see our friends for the first time in 8 months.
Yeah, it's a celebration.
And maybe it never ever leads to drama the next day or bleeding cool articles.
Never.
Or sexual harassment lawsuits.
It's all good. It never goes anywhere. Speaking of comics, so I do this. I'm curious to get your take on this. So next week, I had to reduce the font size. This is next week, and this is not inclusive, but it's a lot. Six odd titles. It feels like a lot.
It's weird because apparently the industry is dying and DC is getting out of publishing completely. I don't know if you've heard those rumors. So it's so weird that they're still publishing titles like this.
Well, it's December, so they've got a couple.
Okay.
No, it's like you see IDW up there and Boom and all these. Like there's just there's so many comics, and what's funny is, I don't know, for years, myself and the retailers, like we've had this comment of like, can you publish less, like pick the good stuff and like reduce the size of your line. And then when we get the hint that DC is reducing the size of their line, suddenly it's like, oh my God, they're getting out of comics completely. It's like, no.
Yeah. Well, there's people with an axe to grind that they feel that comics has shoved them out, so they want comics to take a dose of its own medicine. But if they get people that claim to love comics who are rooting for Marvel and DC to fail, let's say that day comes, are they actually going to be happy to never have to go to a comic book store again? Like, what are they really after at the end of that equation?
No, I don't know. And it's like if Marvel disappeared tomorrow, and I totally get, and I think we'll talk about it a little later, the kind of some of the ego and the arrogance and some of the stuff that comes out of that company at times, it does pitch you off, no doubt.
Yeah.
But if they vanished, it's not like everything would be puppies and rainbows. It would topple almost everybody else on that list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I will say this now before I really get started, is everything I say is my own opinion. It doesn't represent DC Comics in any way. Blah, 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 blah.
Yes, of course. I think I want these companies to succeed. I want all of these guys to succeed very, very much. And if there's a comic I don't like, I hope it gets better. But I don't think people necessarily understand how connected all these pieces are, even though they're different companies. Some of the big ones topple. It's not like others just get bigger to fill that void.
Right. Yeah. What do you think would happen if the big two just came out and gave a blanket apology and said, hey, readers, if you were upset at any of our creators for any reason on Twitter over the last 2 years, we apologize, and just left it at that? What do you think would happen?
It'd be weird. I don't know what I don't know if people would know what to do with that. I think I think it would take people by surprise. It'd be a hilarious moment, actually. I think I doubt anybody would stop. I think it's gone too far for several. And then I think a lot of the creators would continue to do what they're doing as well. But
Yeah. All these YouTubers who need to dunk on these two, they're making money by dunking on them. What are they supposed to do now that their anger is vanquished?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the challenge of all this is if you quote unquote win,
Yeah.
and we all go home and we play video games, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's what the people at Xenoscope are hoping for. I think every day it's like just if everybody else goes, it will just be us, and then it will be Xenoscope forever. And
right.
I'm picking on them here, but
So you mentioned in a previous podcast that you actually read 80 to 90% of every comic.
That's true. I go through them all, and not all, but almost all.
Yeah.
So most of the stuff on the list I do read. I'd like to say I definitely absorb some better than others, and maybe the true test is what I read a second time. So several days later, I'll go back and I'll read something again.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
It's a lot. The challenge is that you come to realize that regardless of all the other problems people bring up all the time, so many stories and things are repetitive. Like there's very little new out there.
Yeah. So let's say this is a horse race, and we're looking at the names of the horses right now. We have, unironically, Dark Horse. We have DC, Image, blah, blah, blah. Let's say you're going to bet on someone, and you want to make some money on this bet. Like you're going to buy stock in one of these companies. It's going to pay off in 5 years. Who would you bet on? I'll answer first. I'm obviously betting on DC because they pay my bills, and I do believe that they have a plan coming out. I really love Dark Horse. That's where I got my start. I like the people there. I feel like they've managed to maneuver up pretty well after losing Star Wars and some of the other licenses that they had. Who else would you bet on?
I think Boom is probably on that list at this point.
I like Boom a lot.
Yeah, they're making some real smart choices, and I think they're stabilizing. They're doing something. I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but they're kind of building up month by month, and they don't hotshot stuff. They slowly build value. And I want to take kind of scale back and look at the numbers over the last 3-4 years or so, and I'll bet what you see with Boom is just this continual upward line. And I think it's a healthy place. I'm with you on Dark Horse, by the way. My heart would love Dark Horse to do really, really well. I so many good memories of that company, from the 80s.
I was going through Dark Horse lists of IPs a few years back, and if I ever have a bucket list year, let's say I get cancer, and I don't care how it looks. If I have to work for like a smaller publisher and I don't have to worry about what people are thinking, I could work for Dynamite. No one's going to say shit. Let's say I get cancer and I want to work for Dark Horse. I would almost want to do a bunch of short stories using all of their IPs, because they've got RoboCop, which I want. I'd love to do Time Cop, which no one is asking for except for me.
Somebody from
Aliens, of course.
Right now, call Sean Murphy right now.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff I would love to, like Sean's cancer year, when I finally get cancer and die, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna fucking draw my favorite things from Dark Horse for a year, and then
let's see
how that goes. There's so many great IPs that they have, or at least had at one point, and I would love to do that.
They still have quite a lot. I mean, they lost them obviously, but they've still got quite a lot there, and I really want them to. I really want them to kind of pull out of this and succeed, and all the rest. And I'm anxious for DC to put out the solicitations for March. Which I think by schedule, this should be about this time next week. We should see solicitation.
Yeah, and you mentioned in another podcast that a lot of creators won't come on the record to say that they know that DC isn't closing its doors. I can clearly get that out of the way right now. Is I just signed a contract with DC Comics for a White Knight line or just my own books, whatever it's going to be. But why the hell would they spend the money to pay lawyers to argue with my lawyers to give me a deal, which I just signed for the next 3 years? It's just insane to me that people think that this rumor might actually be true. I mean, if comics are going to go under, it's going to take at least 10 years out of fairness,
It is. It's going to be slow. I think people have this idea that the big AT&T will come in and just like pull the rug out from under them. But in the history of AT&T and Disney, just going with their history, nothing closes fast. It's always a slow, ugly process.
Like you said, like these are IPs. This is like a cheap IP farm. AT&T spends more money on office supplies every year than it takes to run DC Comics, I'm guessing. I mean, are they better off making up flyers for Batman and mailing them to kids to go buy Arkham Asylum games, or are they better off continuing to let comics be the advertising for them and make money in its own right?
Yeah. No, I agree. I like for the conversation to get settled one way or another. And I think, like you, I mean, I've heard from enough people now who have deals. And so
Yeah.
I would like for them to just kind of put their stuff out. But
Yeah.
I also get the other side. And I think the other side is just, hey, why should we respond to rumors we know aren't true? Our response will be, we're publishing the comics and then the market will know. And I get that in theory.
Right.
But I think Marie Javins, for example, is very, very good in front of a camera. She does very good interviews.
Yeah.
Like, get her out there and have her start talking. I think it'd be smart.
Yeah. So that the question is like, is this a really noisy minority of people that feel this way? Or is it a substantial amount of people who actually pay money for comics?
Yeah.
Because the answer is important. And I think it's okay to, I mean, look what happened with Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Is some would say the trolls won. Some would say people who really liked that franchise made their voices known. I'm sure there were a lot of trolls in there too, by the way. But it ended up working out for the best because it ended up being one of the most successful video game movies of all time.
Yeah.
So I don't think ignoring it is always the best solution, but it's hard to gauge how big the problem is because if your head's in YouTube and Twitter all day, it seems like a huge problem. But I'm not sure if you tease it out how much that actually matters to sales in actual comic book shops, you know?
Nobody's been able to really pinpoint it. And I think there's a lot of anecdotal stuff out there. It's, and I think, I'm not sure. I'm convinced that there's an analysis you can do to give you this answer, but it's hard to see what the impact is really on the shops. And another problem is just stuff's too abstracted. You have the publisher, to the distributor, to the comic shop, to the customer.
Right.
And there's too many places where numbers get lost in that process.
Yeah, exactly.
There's enough smoke there to know there are problems, and there's definitely a discontented part of the fan base. But it is hard to pinpoint, like you say, how big that is exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing too that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough when people talk about the collapse of comics is, and this is why I'm not on Twitter anymore and why I never really waded into controversy, is like, I don't just represent me. I represent my colorer. I represent my marketing guy. I represent my editor. Like there's 20 people that depend on me to be smart about it. And these companies aren't just faceless organizations. These are blue collar companies where people have generations invested in. And when a company like that shuts down, it is really sad and tragic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not like there's a bunch of liberals in the office high-fiving each other. There's a lot of blue collar people making $40K a year who just, you know, they do menial stuff like take out the trash, assisting editors and making, double checks on copy, whatever it is. Like these are human beings who I would hate to see them go away because I really love these people. They're great drinking buddies, and to like shut down all of that is such a shame. And I think when people start celebrating the demise of comics, it's like you forget about the silent majority of people that actually takes to make comics, you know?
It is, and I think the people who get punished, like you say, they're not necessarily the people you think. It is the blue collar people. It's the people who are just trying to get comics to the printer or trying to make sure the logistics are done or all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And the people you're really angry at tend to just bounce over to do something else. They tend to be in these scenarios. They're going to be the most survivable of these moments. It's. No, it's a lot of comics. Although we are getting a brand new, another Dawn of X, or I guess Reign of X book. So a brand new X-Men book because we didn't have enough of them. There are not nearly enough of those. So
it's not Reign of 10. You sure that's how they've
preferred? Actually, it's like a rain of money. I don't call it what it is.
Yeah.
And so speaking of so Go To Comics. I want to say you are currently in the midst of the third White Knight series, Harley Quinn. You're writing with your wife, or your wife is writing it and you're helping.
Yeah.
I think it's a great book.
Thank you. It's hard to gauge how well it's doing. She's been writing romance novels for 10 years, and she has seen me go through the gauntlet of comics for a long time. So she was worried that when she got this gig, she was like, "Are people going to think this is nepotism?" And I said, "Probably, but fuck them." When you watch the Marvel 616, there's all kinds of nepotism going on. It doesn't mean the women aren't necessarily qualified. Just take the money and run, sweetheart.
Good advice. I love it.
Yeah. And then, the other part of it is she actually is qualified. She did win an Emmy for working with Linda Ellerby and Nick News and all this stuff. So yeah, she's a lot more qualified than some of the other people, I would imagine. That's not a controversial statement. There's all kinds of unqualified people in every business.
Well, and you should support your wife too. I mean, but she's definitely earning it on her own. I think it's a good book. It's got a good style. I mean, I was reading it. What struck me was it fits right in with your universe. It doesn't feel like some other writer came randomly into the picture. It definitely, it's anchored in what you created.
Yeah, no, like I think some people might assume that this is 50-50, her and me, but it really is like 80-20, mostly on her. Like I came up with the general idea of what I wanted. I broke the issues down. Like there's some stuff I'm teaching her about comics, like, oh, she wants to edit something out, for example. I'm like, no, you can leave that in. Comic book readers will get that. And she's like, okay. So I'm still teaching her about the craft. So, but she is elevated to a top 10 book out of the blue, and she is nervous about not feeling like she's earned it. But I think she's doing really well. In fact, there's some stuff that she's able to do that I would never be able to do. Like she made Harley a go-go dancer. Whereas if I try to do that, I'm like, people are going to think I made Harley a stripper. But whatever, my wife's a lady. They're not going to attack her. So boom. She made a joke where Harley jumps off a pole and into Jack Napier's lap. And she's like, you play your cards right, you can be Jack in the Box. I'm like, that is so bad. I could never get away with that. But you can get away with that. Like, by all means, like she's my secret weapon.
It's a good, I think it's a great series. And there's a lot of people really took to this universe. We talked about this a little bit before, but I really feel like it is a good story, but I also think your timing was interesting because you had kind of a Capullo version, or sorry, not Capullo, a Scott Snyder version with Capullo. You had that version of Batman, which is very distinctive. You had Tom King version of Batman, which was very distinctive. And then you had yours, and it really kind of fulfilled this kind of triangle of
everything. It's weird. We got lucky. I mean, if Scott was doing Court of Owls while White Knight came out, I don't know if White Knight would have done so well. But because Scott's like what's that kind of pitch, like high in the sky pitch, or like
big concept.
Yeah, thank you, big concept pitch. All these characters like Lord of the Rings, and Batman's playing a guitar at some point. That's awesome. I'm glad that is absolutely different than what I'm trying to do. And because Scott went into like Lord of the Rings, Batman, and Tom did whatever Tom did, it left this window for like, hey everyone, you want like kind of a classic Batman where things are generally grounded? Come to this universe. And it ended up kind of working out.
It was smart for DC because there are audiences that like all three, and so they got to go where they wanted to go and get what they wanted out of it. And I think it was none of the series felt overlapping. Everybody had a distinctive story they were trying to tell. I thought it was great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we're like so issue 1 did like 80K numbers for digital. I don't know what digital makes that, but I think it's a top 10 book. Issue 2 introduced 2 new villains, the Producer and Starlet. So the collector's market is blowing up over that. I hope it continues to keep high numbers. It's hard to tell over the holiday season and with comics being what comics are right now, like what a hit even is anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of recalibration that has to happen. I think it's a hard time in the industry to assess any of this stuff, but it should do strong. I've got a question you may not be able to answer, so I don't want to get you in trouble by asking you this, but you've created some new characters in the White Knight universe.
Yep.
Is there any thought of have any conversations kind of emerged of some of those characters making their way into the core universe, if you will, or is anybody any kind of crossover?
No. I think either it's maybe too soon, or because of what happened with me on Twitter this past summer, and I became radioactive. A lot of writers are sort of like afraid to associate with me in some way. Maybe they don't want to, but I would love if like Neo Joker was in a book where she was fighting Punchline or something like that,
It seems like a natural thing at some point.
Yeah, and I don't know what you have to do to pull that off. If I went to, I like James a lot, and he's always fun. If I saw him at a show, I'd ask him about that, but I don't know what he has planned. So I would love to see it drip into the main line in some way, and I think one day it will. But right now, for a few different reasons, it's just not happening.
Well, and there are distinctive plans going on there that they're teeing up, and that James has going on, and also I think if you're, and again, I wouldn't expect you to comment on this, but if you're somebody at the higher level of DC and ultimately Warner Media, you have to be looking at these White Knight volumes as saying this is a this is almost a ready-made plug and play, 8-episode streaming series that just is laid out for us. It's very clean.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think that White Knight is anything new. I think when Batman movies come out, it's basically what White Knight did. It's like, hey, everybody, you know who Batman is. You've seen Michael Keaton. You played some video games. Well, here's Robert Pattinson. And here's a lot of familiar shit. Here's a few twists that you might not. Ooh, James Gordon's black. Ooh, surprise! Like, people are fine with that shit. They don't care. Like, people are a lot more imaginative. You give your audience more credit. And I don't think that what White Knight did is anything new. I just think it's like an Elseworlds thing that took off and is now like fighting for space in its own universe, which is weird. And I know a lot of writers who are asking DC, can I do my own White Knight universe? Can I do my own thing? And they're like, well, we already have that. So you're too late. So I felt like I've tripped into a very successful thing that I really want to, strike while the iron's hot. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. Thank you for the kind words.
I love that it's continuing, and again, your wife's killing it on that. So it's
I'll let her. I'll let her know you said that, man. She's super worried about this. She's a lot more worried about negative reviews and what people think about her. And because I've been doing this for 18 years, I generally don't care what people think for the most part. So I'm kind of used to it, and she's sort of new to it. And when she sees and hears about some of the things that happen in comics, social media, she's like, is this even a world I want to get involved with?
It's a real question you have to ask yourself.
I
mean, she's doing a pretty. This is a high profile book. It's going to be one of the bigger sellers, and I mean that would be intimidating for me to come in and. She's doing a great job. I think it's a lot of fun, and
No, I'm super proud of her, man. I can't wait to see what she does next. I know we've got some more plans for Harley. I'm hoping the way that this is lined up. So when this comes out as a trade, I hope this will be labeled as Volume 3, and then my next Batman book will be Volume 4, and then we'll do more spinoffs or whatever. So Volume 5 and 6. Like, I like everything to be clearly labeled so new readers can come to the shelf and know what to pick up first, so to speak.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Shifting gears for a second, you had this question, and I think it's a fun one to kind of chat about.
That's right. So before we did this, so the reason that I'm here and why this all started is because listening to Perch talk, a lot of times in his podcast, he would say, I would love to get a creator on here to argue with me or to give me the other side, and nobody will do it. And I wrote him, and I'm like, I'll fucking do it. I've got nothing to lose. And the thing is, I agree with you 99% of the time. So I can play devil's advocate, and tell you what I think they're thinking, but I'm not, I don't know. I'm too much on your side but I might be the only one who's willing to come in here and risk my career to do it.
It's hopefully there's no risk. But,
no, there's no risk.
I think, I find that I generally agree with a lot of people. I mean, honestly, the people we've had on, it's all pretty reasonable. And I don't get too hung up. The part that always confuses me is when somebody gets really, really intense about needing to be right about their subjective thing. It's like I don't know. It doesn't bother me when people have a radically different opinion than me. So
I'm wired the same way. So when I said to Purchase, like, well, why don't you hit me with your questions? He never wrote me a list. But that's fine. So I wrote him a list of things I wanted to ask you, because you're always doing the interviewing. And one of the things I asked you was one of your favorite superhero movies. So here we are.
Yeah, so I'll say one that's not on this list, and I think it may be a controversy, but Unbreakable to me is one of the best superhero films that's ever been made.
You're one of those, huh?
Excellent. All right, we get it. It doesn't fit, I know, the big logic, but I love I just love the classic kind of progression of the toll it takes to be a hero and kind of that rise to the occasion. It got me. It shouldn't have, because I think the director Shyamalan was definitely cheap in with what he was doing. He was using some cheap tricks, and I hate that he got me, but I do love that film. So
I like Shyamalan's. I really liked Signs up until the last 10 minutes. I think he's doing so many things correctly, and it's easy to pick on him because he's like, in some of his movies, he's like 95% of the way there, and then you get the surprise ending, and it's like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah. I give him credit. He tries to do different things. Now, sometimes it's just dismal failure. I think, what is it? The Happening, the movie where they went, the enemy was grass, I think.
Oh my God. That had the posters with clouds and blue sky on it. I remember that. Like the movie that's happening, but in this poster, literally nothing is happening.
It was, that was a terrible movie on every front. But
I haven't seen it.
I like the prequel. I get that that's unusual pick. I don't know. I don't have the same hatred for the MCU that a lot of people have. I do. It is at this point you can definitely see the style coming through, and it feels extremely repetitive. But what about you? What's your favorite superhero movie?
Rocketeer is up there with me.
Oh yeah, that is a good one.
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is high up there.
Mm-hmm.
Batman '89, of course.
Sure.
And Kick-Ass, the first Kick-Ass, I thought was amazing.
I did. Yeah.
And not just because Mark Millar is paying me off to say that, and so he would love that I would be making this joke. But yeah, that first Kick-Ass, like when Nicolas Cage is on fire and his daughter is doing all this killing, that is an amazing scene.
It is.
It's such a great time to be a comic book fan with all these movies.
I can't. It's just going to make me sound like a terrible parent. I can't wait to show that movie to my daughter. She's 10.
Yeah,
it's not quite time yet, but
yeah.
I don't get. By the way, I'm looking at this picture that I just grabbed off Google. Why is Despicable Me up here as a superhero movie?
You know what? I didn't even think to ask that.
How the hell did that land on here? I don't know. You know,
because that's the best one, Perch. Obviously,
I guess I'm confused why that has to be somebody's idea of a joke. I don't know. What about so? What's your? This is probably the one that I think most people disagree with me on. Of the Superman movies, what's your favorite Superman movie?
I thought Man of Steel was a great science fiction movie. I don't know if it was a great Superman movie. Yeah. And I have a lot more respect for that than I think some other people do.
It's aging better than I think people realize.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Zack Snyder fan, but holy hell, I was impressed with that one when it came out. Now, was it Superman? Sorta. Was it a good sci-fi movie? Yeah, all day long, But I thought you were asking me about the original Superman movies, and that would be a lot harder.
Yeah, so that it all fits. You went for the good answer, but I would say the original Superman movies, and I know people disagree. Superman 3 is always the one that I enjoyed the most. I don't know if it's a good movie. I like the same one. That's not really Superman, but there's something about Richard Pryor as a computer hacker making red kryptonite that is just so many fun moments in that.
Dude, as a kid, when that woman gets assaulted by computer tech,
oh yeah,
I haven't seen that movie for 25 years. I'm just pulling that out of my long-term memory. I don't even know if that's actually what happened, but that still scares me to this day.
It does. The computer sucks her in and then turns her into a robot zombie.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anything with red kryptonite that's when Superman is the most interesting. That's when he becomes like Batman, where he has to face his darker nature. Yeah,
it's the shots of Superman. There's a little 3-minute clip of Superman just flying around the planet being a dick. And he's just doing the most petty nonsense. They have this long setup of the Olympics are going on. They're carrying the torch, and they've been all the way around the world. And he's climbing the steps, and they're just taking their time with his shot. And then Superman is hanging out in the background, waiting to blow it out at the last second. It is the super dickery that I just really appreciate right there.
Yeah, there's a Superman title you never hear, super dickery.
Yeah. This is why I think I love the old Superman comics from the 60s, where Superman would routinely starve Aquaman and he would just fly being an asshole.
Right.
I love that stuff. But
yeah, have you seen the Fleischer Superman cartoons?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Man, some of those do not age well for
No, they do not.
For political correctness reasons, and well justified, I would say.
They are not. I do not see those on HBO Max right now.
No, it's too bad because they are really well animated. It's just too bad that you can't say that stuff about Japanese people now. It's just sorry. I don't care who you voted for. That's not cool.
No, it doesn't work at all. There's so much in there. It's funny to watch comics that age poorly. I did the retrospective on the Astonishing X-Men, and that's not that old. That's less than 20 years. And you have one of the characters there kind of making jokes about being raped, and it's like, oh my God, how did this get out into print?
Ooh, yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh, you made me think of another question I wanted to ask you, but I'll wait for a better moment.
Okay, well, we'll do the flip side of this real quick. So,
most overrated.
What's the worst? Yeah.
Wow, I've never seen Shaq steal.
Okay, yeah, that's a contender. How about the Halle Berry Catwoman?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so you've missed all the terrible ones.
Yeah, you know what? When I saw The Last Stand, I really love the part where Wolverine is walking up to Jean Grey and he's like, "I love you," and then he kills her. I thought that was such a great moment, and that might be the only memorable moment in that movie. But yeah, I didn't hate it as much as everybody else did.
I think people remember hating it because they liked the first two, and then this one came out. It was worse, and then but since that time, there's been so many terrible films that kind of erased that. We were talking about before. So this shot there on the right, this will test how old you are.
Yeah.
If you grew up in the '70s, this was a big moment. This was where we had the Hulk on TV before, but Thor was going to show up for the first time. That is Thor that he's with, and this was just the shittiest show ever. Just terrible.
Don't tell Lou Ferrigno; he'll kick your ass and then charge you $20.
He will. That's my first time I took my wife to a con. She's like, "Oh, I got to get his autograph." She goes over there and he's like, "It's $20." It's just.
Yep.
It is that there were some awful shows in the past, but what more recent? Has there been a show you haven't liked recently that just did not work for you?
You mean like an overrated?
Yeah, I mean it's tough. There's so many superhero movies out right now as well.
Yeah, I only started watching Captain Marvel the other night, and I could not get through it. I am a liberal. I have a lot of liberal friends. They all seem to like that movie. I'm not as liberal as they are. But when they were raving about it, I was like, okay. And I started watching it, and I'm like, I don't get it. And I think nothing against Brie Larson or whoever the hell's in it. Like, it's just the movie did not grab me.
It's funny because before the film came out, there was a lot of commentary on Brie Larson being the problem, and she's not smiling, and the costume looked bad, and all the rest.
Yeah.
But when you watch the movie, she was not really the problem. Like, the problem was the plot. The problem was the plot.
Yeah. Yeah, the script. I felt like when I watched it, I'm like, I feel like I've walked in 10 minutes late and I missed something in the very beginning, but I didn't walk in late. You go like 45 minutes being confused,
Yeah, exactly. And it's set back in time, but it was off-putting. Like, the characters, Sam Jackson's Nick Fury was just different for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And it I don't know. It was a tough one. It's tough because the movie before it, the Black Panther, where in terms of introducing a new character, that one seemed like it was done very, very well. Like they really introduced this whole other world. But
yeah.
It feels like Captain Marvel didn't have a villain either.
I didn't get that far. Again, I stopped after my wife. You blame her. She's a lady. You can't get mad at her for turning off a feminist movie.
Perfect.
We were both like, yawn, and we put on Brooklyn Nine-Nine instead.
There you go. Yeah, that's going to be more entertainment for your time.
Yeah, I love that you put Thor in here. I've never seen this clip of Lou Ferrigno with Thor. Is that do you remember when Vincent D'Onofrio played Thor, kinda in Adventures of Babysitting?
Yep.
He was a pretty good fucking Thor.
He was better than this Thor. You'll have to. You should go on YouTube. If anybody is looking at this right now and is confused by this whole image, go on YouTube. Look at some of these clips from the '70s of Hulk Thor, and there's a Hulk Daredevil in there that's also shitty, but. The whole Thor was peak shitty. He was. It was absolutely terrible. And the actor, I don't know who it was, and I'm sure it's a very wonderful person I'm bagging on right now. He seemed completely confused why he was in this film and what he was doing, and every aspect was awkward.
Yeah. Huh.
Bad films. It's a good time.
And was Shaq Steel? Was that overtly a Superman movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was
like there's no S. Why didn't they have an S on his chest in that poster?
Oh, sorry. No, I answered your question correctly. No, it was definitely the Steel from the comic, but there really was not a close connection to Superman.
Right, but like, why not though? Because you got diversity, you got Shaquille O'Neal, you got Superman. I mean, like, why the hell wouldn't that be a good thing?
Leverage that brand. Yeah. I don't know. They were saving it for a Superman 5 that would come out.
If you released Steel 2 with Shaquille O'Neal and he took like a Chris Pratt photo of himself getting back into shape to play Steel again, that would people go nuts for that. That's like the cult hit that people are begging for. And it would be better than any Superman movie ever.
It probably would. No, I agree. I think you got to tap into that nostalgia stuff while it's out. I mean, eventually it crosses over. But now would be the time.
Yeah.
That would be hilarious videos of him getting back in shape, by the way.
I would love it. Yeah. All I see him now is advertising like Hot and Icy or whatever that painkiller patch is, and selling insurance.
You never watch your heroes change.
Yeah. He voted for the first time ever, and I was like, "Ooh, that's not something I would want to admit." Shaquille O'Neal.
I now know when I was going to come, and I think we were hoping that I was going to come see you in November. And take up there. Now I know when we do get together in person, I'm bringing that whole Thor movie, and we will get lots of whiskey and tequila.
Good, yeah. I will get some Maine-made vodka and blow your mind with our local selection.
Perfect. That is what we've got to do.
I think your goal with the whole podcast should actually be to be sponsored by your favorite vodka. What are they called again?
Oh, I mean, no, literally anything. So I've tried. I continue to go down the list of Patron, and so now I'm looking at other things. But Captain Morgan is the target now. I'm just going to continue to mention them until that sponsorship appears.
So I had some luck with Dick's Pale Ale or Dick's Ale. You know that beer company from Colorado?
Yeah. Okay.
So their marketing guy was into comics, and it arrived in my feed when I was back on Twitter, and I was like, wait. Dick's Pale Ale. I was like, what the fuck? So I wrote the guy. I was like, yeah, I love comics, and we don't have much of a marketing department. It's just me. So, and I'll go, well, can I draw your beer into Tokyo Ghost? He's like, yeah, sure. We don't give a shit. Most of our PR is centered around dick jokes. I'm like, all right. So if you go to Tokyo Ghost, I think you'll see like some shameless advertising for Dick's Pale Ale. Given that, they might be willing to sponsor you.
All right, I'm doing it. I don't even need money. I just I want somebody to just retweet like a thumbs up. That's I'm looking for I'm looking for Captain Morgan. Give me the thumbs up. That's
exactly.
Okay, I'm going to definitely do that, because I think that it is looking like when I open up my shop, it's likely that the first location I'll open up will be back in Colorado again. So,
good. Oh, I'll be your first. I'll be your first big signing. I'll come out there on my own dime just because I like what you're doing. So,
we're gonna have a good time. We'll argue about that later, but
okay.
So you had a bigger question here, but you said you had another thought that you wanted to jump to.
It was not related at all to this, but this is a deeper question that needs all of our attention.
Okay.
So I asked you talk a lot about the lack of marketing in comics. If you were a publisher and I gave you my next book, how would you market it? What would you do that would be different than what the big two already do?
Yeah, it's a tough question, because, well, I mean, no, it's not tough. It's more, I think that it's a very complicated problem. This is where I need to take another drink. What's always tough about this is that, and I think this is why comics get themselves into trouble they get into, is the brands and the properties are known around the world already. So much of the marketing work's been done. In fact, there's some video somewhere in the next week or whenever it goes, because I record all this stuff ahead of time, where I make the point that there are companies like Apple and Google and Facebook and others that spend north of $100 million a year just in brand recognition. But with comics, you don't need to do that. I mean, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, these core characters are already known. And so the marketing approach has to be very, very different. It has to be more along the lines of, reminding people that there are comics, for one thing, giving some people some encouragement that, hey, we're producing a product. It's easy for you to pick up. You need to be scared. It kind of dispels some of the myths that, to me, it feels like the comic industry does to themselves. Like I'll read these reports come out from Marvel or DC where they say, we need to provide a jumping on point because it's way too hard for a fan to figure out what issue of, this comic that comes out. Legion of Superheroes, DC often talks about as just being the hardest book in the world to get people to understand, because there's just so many comics and so difficult and nobody would ever figure it out.
Right.
But I don't think people actually have that problem. So a lot of the marketing I think that needs to happen is, hey, there is a comic book on all of our channels, on HBO Max, when we're doing stuff, just remind people that comic books exist. You can go find them, give them some channels to do it, whether it's a comic shop or Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever it happens to be. And then do a kind of a better job of telling people how to jump into comics. So, with White Knight, it's easy. It's White Knight, Volume 1, Issue 1, start.
Right.
with, Bendis comes on to Superman, where do people begin? Do they begin at the beginning of Bendis's run? If you're 2 years later and it's this on monthly comic, where should people start? How should, and just make it easier. It's like, it's too difficult for a customer to, if they're coming into a new comic, to know where to start these days. And the publishers themselves, it feels like they're creating the problem more than doing nothing. They're actually making the problem worse by weird volumes or just very inconsistent messages. And I'll shut up. I'm talking too much.
No, you're fine.
This week we had Daredevil 25, and in this issue, it's this big reveal. So spoilers for Daredevil 25 right here. Elektra is going to be Daredevil for a while, and that's the big reveal. And Matt's in prison, and she's doing this. And if you're coming into this comic and you've heard good things about Daredevil, this would be the issue for you to pick up and start reading. And many readers will go forward and backward. If they like what they read, they'll go seek out in reverse and pick up the line. But Marvel did really nothing to tell anyone that this issue was important, that it was coming, that this would be a good place for retailers to kind of position it so that new customers could come in. It just, the solicitation was like, Matt's in jail. Shit happens. And
that's not good. Yeah.
No, and so they're missing really obvious points where people who want to come into comics can come into comics. Mm-hmm. And I think in many cases they're producing the content that's fine. They're just, I've always feel bad for people like yourself, writers and artists. People are creating some pretty cool stuff, and then it feels like there's a really rapid expiration date. Like you're creating really amazing hooks.
Yeah.
But
So my I can speak about my personal experience, and maybe I got the good treatment with White Knight, but I feel like they gave me White Knight not knowing that it was going to sell as well as it did. They gave it to me thinking, all right, you do your book, and then you can go back to working with Scott Snyder to do a book that'll really make money. And I'm not butthurt about that. Like that's how businesses are, and Scott's a seller. Like if I was my editor, that's what I would be saying to me too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So and even with that, they still produced an ad, a YouTube ad, I think a TV ad that ran on Sci-Fi and Comedy Central. They took my art, scanned it in, they tweened it for those animators out there, and they made it interactive. They showed me like, here's two versions, here's one voiceover, here's the other voiceover, which do you like better? Like they included me in stuff that no one ever has before, and they gave me all the interviews I wanted. And, my policy with interviews is less is more. Just give me the big fish, and I don't like to do small interviews with CBR people that I can get myself.
Mm-hmm.
So they generally, I thought their plan was really good. They were very attentive. They listened to my needs. I gave feedback. I pushed as much as I could as well. And even still, no one saw this book coming. Like I had the third issue bump, as you described. Comic book shops still under ordered issue 1. Like I don't know what DC was supposed to do beyond what they were already doing. And I'm not saying that they give every book that treatment. But I've seen their machine work or do its best. And like, I still don't know how to get through to comic shops. Like, hey, order White Knight Volume 1. Like Sean's had the third issue bump 3 times in his career by this point. You should know to order heavy on this book. And they didn't. And I'm not trying to put anybody over the coals or anything like that. Like I get that running a shop is fucking hard, but like, I don't know what else they were supposed to do for marketing, because I think they did everything, and it still was an upset. When the numbers came in.
I think well. First off, I think your experience was more unique.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah,
I remember that material, and it was good material, and I think it landed with some customers. I think it did. It had the effect of getting customers in the shop to add to polls and kind of get interested. It wasn't at the volume that should have been kind of the wake call for shops to go, oh, some stuff's coming. But in fairness, I think a lot of shops are running on such a thin margin of time. I don't know that they always notice those things. I'm always amazed, by the way. I go to a shop or I meet somebody and they're like, what do you use for your inventory? And I'm like, oh, this software over here. And I have some Excel charts that I do to chart month by month. And then like, what do you use? It's like, well, I use this yellow notepad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
no, they didn't want to update to point of sale back in the early 2000s. Like comic book shops are kicking and screaming, being dragged into the future. But that's a separate argument.
It totally, and that's all on them. That's nothing that Marvel could do. The part that feels like it's missing, and I've gotten different answers from editors when I've asked this, is that the solicitations that go to the shop are just not what they need to be, and yet it feels like it'd be a very easy thing to correct.
Yeah,
I'm not sure who's telling who that it needs to get better. Like I know that the shops, when we show up at Comics Pro or we go to these retailer summits, I'll say, hey, solicitations need to be better. And for a while, I got to become I was being called the guy who complains about solicitations because nobody else would.
Right.
But then you talk to the retailers and they're going, I really don't know what to order. It's this giant blob of text. I don't know. So
yeah.
On one hand, I think that the publishers could do a better job of positioning books.
Right.
On the other hand, I have this nagging worry in the back of my head that even if they did, it would go unnoticed.
Yeah. So when we do solicits, it's my editor, Maggie Howell. She's great at this. She'll send me 3 sentences about like, here's what's going to go into previews. You know, Harley Quinn #2. Harley does this, and that. XYZ happens. So it's like, okay, there's like teasing there. There's no spoilers in there. It's tantalizing enough. The customer, i.e., the comic shop, knows what they're buying. Great. She's amazing at that. I admit I don't read other solicits from people, so I might happen to have a great solicit writer, i.e., my editor. In that case, to your point, I would say, well, we need someone to write all the solicits a lot better and make it more clear what each issue is. Don't just expect that Daredevil is going to sell because Elektra's in it all of a sudden. You got to give us more, you know? So that's fair.
I think you have a great editor. I think that it's you can definitely tell multiple people are writing the solicits, and some are better than others. And a couple of people, I don't know if here's where I'm going to pick on somebody who probably doesn't deserve it, but in the Jordan White curated X books, the solicitations are often very, very jokey and non-descriptive of anything. And
Jordan White's the guy with the mustache, right? He's like a Mario Brothers. Okay, I think I met him once.
I don't know. Very, very nice guy. Sweet ukulele.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. But please continue.
He is. It is. There's something missing there where it feels like it's an afterthought. And so you do see solicits that some are very well done, some are an afterthought. But the other problem is that when you're going to order these comics and you're trying to get them in hands of customers, you're reading through, you know, I showed the screen of 66 titles this week. You're going through like 400 or 500 books. And even the most diligent, you know, hardcore person all starts to blur together very, very quickly. Yeah. And I think one thing that I would say, if I could ask DC or Marvel to do, is take your solicits, figure out some ways to tag them. And what I mean by tagging is a more technical term, but just tag, like if you've got a new artist on this, if it's the start of a run. And so you can filter based on, here are some comics that are beginning a storyline. And here's comics that have Batman in them. Here's comics that have Superman. And lean into that, because it will help retailers who are coming to the table and trying to put this stuff out to go, all right, let me just cut this with all the horror books. And here they are. And here's what I can order, because I kind of know what those customers are. Right. I think that you could accomplish that with, a part-time intern who spends 2 really hard days at the office. I don't think it's that tough to basically collect stuff up and do it. And I've said in the past, I will volunteer to do that for free for anyone, just to show you how easy it can be done. And I think it's a huge impact.
Now, you were just saying too that your fear is if they did do this and if it didn't work, that would be one of your other fears.
Yeah, and it would. I think the other problem, because it is a 2-way street. I think there's
because then the weak link might be on the receiving end.
Yes, and it is. It's definitely a weak link. There's no doubt about it. I think a lot of comic shops have moved to a model of ordering that is really based on kind of pull box and then some very arbitrary kind of math that they do. And it's why you see some of these comic shops that over order on issue 1s, because they've just, even though they know it's wrong, that's the math they're trained to do. And they're like, okay, well, it's a new Superman book. It's number 1. I'm going to order 150% of what I normally order. And it comes. And, that doesn't work either. Puts shops out of business.
Right. Yeah.
The other, it's a whole other piece is I think there's a lot that they could do with digital and sharing, and it's a much more complicated topic, but it's when you have a digital book that's maybe out on Comixology and you buy it, being able to include some embeddable code that you could click to say, I just bought this, and post it to my wall or on Twitter or whatever else, going to post these books out,
right.
and encourage more people to kind of funnel in and find you. I think that's another thing.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Right. Yeah. Well, I can take your concerns and I can run it up the ladder and up the flagpole and see what I can do for you.
Well, someday we'll be at a con. I'll buy everybody drinks, and then you can say, hey, come listen to this crazy asshole. And then
I want, I really am for customer service, and that is funny. That phrase "customer service" on Twitter started to get villainized as being like dog whistly or something, and I think it might have started with me because I legit meant customer service, as far as like pros being nice to their customers. Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know where that is right now because I'm off Twitter.
I mean, it's still there. I think it's that dynamic of common sense. Hey, you should be nice to your customers, and then sometimes people ask for more than that. It's like, in addition to being nice to the customer, you should also submit to every crazy request they have. And it's like, okay,
well, there's a difference. There's customer service and there's customer relations. So I should have said customer relations.
That's
as the creator, like, it's not my job to tell DC or Image Comics, whoever, to like do something very specific just so you will be happy. That's not how it works. I can take general complaints and try to see what I can do, but mostly my job is customer relations. Like, my job is to interact with you and send you away happy, so you buy more comics. That's generally my job. That's not customer service. That's customer relations. Regardless, a lot of people on Twitter are really bad at this.
Well, they don't. So we've talked about this before too. I don't. There's not really any training manual. There's not any guidelines for how to do this, and a lot of people are coming into this just blank. They don't know what to do. Yeah.
No, you in one of your previous podcasts, you mentioned me and Scott as being good spokespeople for DC, and I appreciate that. But I am not trained in this. If I'm good at this at all, it's because I have made mistakes. I've had like an 18-year career, and I've made mistakes and said dumb things a lot. And I'm self-aware, and I don't want to be that guy anymore. And I have like a kind of a angry punk rock background, so it's in my nature to sort of push the line, which is not what branding people like. So like, I don't feel qualified to do this at all. So when you mentioned me, I'm like, I am flattered, but I am not the guy. Only through trial and error have I been reasonably good at this. And even then, I'm sure they'll ask you to edit out a few things while we talk for these 2 hours or so.
I mean, I think that you and Scott, there's a lot of people who do make this attempt to connect with, like, here's what we're promoting, here's what we're offering. We're not going to wade into the fray. But I think there's this collision that happens between creators and just kind of the dynamic of social media. So forgetting about everything else, you are rewarded for attention, good or bad. You're still rewarded.
You are, yeah. And this is one of the big topics I wanted to talk about. And I asked you if you've seen that documentary, The Social Dilemma, which you've seen.
Yes, on Netflix. I'm very recommended to watch that.
Yeah, sure, people you've heard your friends talk about it. There's a great scene where just sum it up in 5 seconds. A great scene where, like, the CEO of Pinterest, the guy who knows how the formula is written, how to keep people scrolling on Pinterest, he knows how it works. And even he gets home after a long day of work, and he was literally in his pantry closet, locked away while his kids wanted dinner, while he was on Pinterest, like, suckered in by his own formula.
Yeah.
And it's like, what have we done? And the documentary is basically a bunch of Silicon Valley people coming forward and saying, hey, we might have a problem here, and no one wants to say it. It's fascinating. It's scary, and it's nothing that anyone isn't already thinking.
No, I mean, it's tough when you see kind of meltdowns and things that are happening from people, and I've seen creators post things and gets very little engagement, and they start to come unglued. That just, I didn't, why am I not getting enough likes? And unfortunately, social media is wired to it rewards loud, obnoxious behavior.
Yeah, that's really scary to hear, because I'm 40. I'm the last Gen Xer, and when I hear about creators getting upset that they weren't retweeted enough, I go, oh, you must be under the age of 25. And I'm not trying to shit on millennials. I think millennials are dealing with, things that I'm really not. But I just assume they're younger because I know that in their world, that's how they've been raised. But then I hear that people that act this way are in their 50s. And I'm like, what the fuck is going, like, you're way too old for that to be a problem. Like, what went on in your head to make you think that retweets and likes, like, get back to your fucking job, dude. Go back to writing your script. Get back to your drawing. Like, what are you doing? You're burning 80% of your calories being mad at people you're never going to meet on Twitter.
Oh yeah, and I mean, just don't let it do that to yourself. You're killing yourself. It's like, no, it is weird. There was a kind of a weird meltdown earlier this week by a very famous artist. You and I both know him, who's in his I want to say 50s or maybe 60s.
Ooh, I don't know who this is. I'm not. I haven't seen this at all. This is the beauty of being on Twitter. But I'll have to find out from you after.
Legendary creator, worked on a ton of Marvel books, lots of covers, everything else, and posted the most insane thing about kind of on social media, basically about how his wife slept around. And it's like,
oh shit! Okay, I did see that.
Okay, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and you're like, why would you write that? Like, why in the world would you put that out? It's not good for you. It's not good for anybody. Like, don't do that.
Yeah. Well, I think he's had a lot of time to get over it, and part of his catharsis and getting over it is being able to shoot it out there and to hell with the consequences. Like, I agree, it doesn't make the industry look good, but it is like a nice dose of honesty that you rarely get to see in comics, even though it might be abrasive.
Well, there you go. So maybe I'm looking at this wrong. So out there, I don't know. I see that, and I've seen some of the stuff. I mean, again, I'm not telling any details because it's public. In fact, it hasn't been deleted even as today. Tom Brevoort posted a tweet that was like very, very depressed, and I'm saying, don't do this to yourself. Like, get that out there. Like,
what I think about what's happening online is I think about the social dilemma. And I think that people are addicted to social media, the dopamine hits, just like they are to alcohol or cocaine. I think it's a form of that. Or the way people are addicted to porn these days. So streaming porn, it's out of control, and like nobody is studying it. But with comics people, you have creative folks, generally more emotional and more susceptible to depression. It's a fact.
Yeah.
Now they're not working in an office where they have to deal with people that don't think like they do. They're at home. The king of the roost, queen of the roost, whatever. They're underpaid, which pisses people off. No one likes to be underpaid. Absolutely. They're underappreciated, which pisses people off. They are worried that their industry is going through some, changes, which it is, positive or for the negative. And they are thinking short term by going for pats on the back for joining a tribe online, whether it's the right wing tribe or the left wing tribe. I don't care. Right. And that feels really good to them. And at the end of the day, they're instead of taking a cigarette break now, you just check your Twitter or your social media, and it's not just 5 minutes; it's 30 minutes. And the person you don't know pissed you off enough where, like, you come in after a hard day's work, and your wife's like, "What's wrong?" It's like, "Oh, this fucking person doesn't understand my book." Blah blah blah. Like, I'm one of these people. Like, it took me effort to stop these habits and to figure out that I was fucking up. My wife doesn't deserve this. Why would I pay attention to these people? I'm not saying customers aren't right and they don't have the right to be, like, I'm not saying that at all. But, like, if I'm being trolled in a severe way, why even respond? Or even if creators are trolling me, why even respond? And it took effort for me to beat this addiction. And once I quit Twitter, after 30 days go by, it's like, holy shit, I'm so worried about so many friends of mine because I feel like they're addicted to a mild level drug and they're not aware of it at all.
It gets into you very, very easily. And even though, I mean, I'm older, I'd like to think I brush a lot of it off. I post up this video and I spend some time with it. Most of the videos I spend no time with, and I think that's helpful. But I put some time into something and I post it up. And, one of the first comments I get is, "Hey, you misspelled a word here, you dumbass." Yeah. I'm like, ugh. And I feel like I can feel it ruining my day. And I have to pull myself out, well, hold on a second. None of this matters. It's okay. You don't have to get so wrapped up in it. Right. And it is a drug. I think it's very addictive, and it's I think you laid it out very well. You have people that are at home. They have certain personalities that are maybe a little wired as it is. You have an industry that tends to have a decent amount of I don't want to say backstabbing. That's the wrong word, but just very, very. You can find yourself on the outs very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think all those pieces coming together, and then you go on social media. I think the other factor you mentioned is, yes, people are underpaid, but at the same time, simultaneously, they're exposed to a world that seems like $1 billion world. Like, if you're being paid very, very low rates and you're working on the Avengers, and then you can't help but see that the Avengers is making $1 billion. Now, granted, the movie, it's not yours. There's this, like, it's really in your face that there's a discrepancy.
Yeah.
And that's going to piss people off for sure.
Yeah. When I was in my 20s, I did Punk Rock Jesus when I was like 29 or 30, I forget. I was an angry atheist. I had an axe to grind. Twitter wasn't really a thing back then, or at least I wasn't on it. And I know that if I was that age now, I would be doing exactly what all these other people are doing. I would be raking people, telling them, fuck you. I'd be saying, if you voted for Trump, don't buy my book. I would be doing all those things. Like, I get where that comes from because I was there. And when I did Punk Rock Jesus, I mean, it wasn't left versus right at the time. Like, for me, it was like atheism versus Christianity. And I'm not dunking on Christians at all because I actually get along with Christians very well. And I've learned a lot from doing that book. But I remember when I did the book, I started out halfway through and I really had an axe to grind. And halfway through, I started meeting my readers at conventions. And I'm like, man, I really like these people. These people are Christian. Like, I get I was Catholic and I'm pissed, and they're Protestant and they're okay with it. And like, I don't want to upset these people. I like these people. So I started to tone it down, not because I wanted to sell more. It's because I just, as a human being, I wanted to acknowledge the vague center, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I feel like I'm so lucky to learn that lesson before Twitter happened. Because when Twitter started getting weird, I was like, oh, this is like that when I was on Punk Rock. And if I was the same as I was, 10 years ago, I would easily be stepping into these same traps. And yeah, I don't think a lot of creators get it, or they're sucked into a cycle where they just can't stop now because they've made their bed and they just keep doubling down or something like that.
Well, it's also, it's a case where there isn't a great, and I think it's actually a topic we're going to talk about here in a minute. There's not a great support mechanism where creators go in a more, I don't say healthy way, but a more open way, as opposed to maybe an underground Facebook group or something like that. Yeah. Actually, go get some advice, have some peer mentorship, have somebody say, hey, look, you don't have to worry about this. Here's what you can do.
Right.
That seemed to exist.
Right. Yeah. And I know a lot of these creators behind the scenes, and like some of them take medication, some of them stop taking their meds, and it's clear. And it sucks because I don't like seeing my friends get attacked and trolled, but I'm like, oh, you're off your meds, and that's why you're getting trolled because you said this. Like, you're creating a ruckus, and of course you're getting it back. Like, if you wouldn't be saying these stupid things, you wouldn't be getting trolled so much, idiot. Like, yeah. Like, but I love you. I care about you. I want everybody to get along. Seriously, but my opinion is not welcome anymore.
But it is tough because it is. You do see this. You see people kind of doing it to themselves, and it is a case where you go online and you make some comments, and you're desperate for engagement, and you post up some nice normal things, and you get 10 likes, whatever, and then you post something super inflammatory, and you get 1,000 likes, and that's great news, and so you're happy. But then you get the roller coaster of the backlash of people coming at you, and now suddenly you don't know how this happened. And it's like, the spicier thing you post, the more attention you'll get, good and bad.
Yeah. For me, like, sorry to keep ejecting myself into this, but I feel like a lot of creators never get what they're looking for in comics. They never get paid what they think they're worth. They never get the respect they think they deserve. So they're always on this uphill battle. They're always on their back foot. I've had the luxury of getting respect, getting paid, I've reached the top of the mountain that most people don't in comics. And in that, I found peace, which is when I was able to quit Twitter and look at this and, look at people that don't even agree with me, be like, all right, I see why you're mad. If we were in a bar having beers, I think we get along. But on Twitter, you're being a dick. But that's just how the world is. Like, I have that distance because a lot of my needs have been met in comics, i.e. my bills are paid, I have the respect, I have control, whatever it is. But so many creators never get there that if
Yeah.
I didn't have these things, then I don't know if I would be able to move up to the next level either. I think I would still be drowning in misery. Not only am I pissed at this troll, but I'm pissed that Avengers is making a lot of money and I'm not. No one respects me, blah, blah, blah. Like there are just so many negatives attacking them that I don't think they have the ability to overcome it in some ways.
Well, yeah, and I think the other thing that would help people in this entire process is when people are coming at you. You're a creator. You said something. Maybe you shouldn't have said. You wanted some engagement. You posted some spicy thing. The people who are coming at you are in the same boat you are. They're also looking for engagement. They're also looking for validation. And I had somebody tell me 2 days ago, like, I don't understand why some of these fans, they come online and they say the most outrageous things at me. Why do they say such nasty, homophobic, crazy things at times?
Yeah,
because that's how they're getting engagement. They're also playing the game.
Right.
If they just came in and said, I don't particularly like your comic, but good day, sir. Like, nobody's going to care about that.
Right.
It's a very circular process, and it's a shame.
When I used to read a negative comment, I would always read it in a broken English accent because I would assume the person that wrote it. This is a way to protect yourself. Is just read it as if they just learned English, and it's a lot easier to read. Like, imagine that you get a tweet and you're getting pissed off, but read it in a broken. Like, let's say that you're a guy in Russia who barely speaks. Like, good sir, like, I liked your book. What is not as good as other book? Sometimes people like your stuff and it is not deserved, but I liked your third volume. Thank you. If that guy came up to you on the street in Russia and said that, you'd be like, thank you, dude. You bought the book. There's some negativity in there, but you barely speak English, and that's okay. Like, I'm not gonna, that would be fine. But on Twitter, that is an raging comment. So whenever I got something nasty, I would read it like this, and it suddenly was much easier to comprehend.
In Russia, flames flame you. Yeah,
exactly.
It's perfect. I love that. Actually, that's great.
I just lost all my Russian readers in all the break-off countries.
It helps because I think people read tweets in their own voice.
Yeah.
And then that probably even makes it more personal and more ugly because you're reading it your own way. It's I don't know. It's a mess. I don't see do you see a natural end to this? Like, is there
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you that too, actually.
I don't see an easy end to any of this.
Yeah. So, all right, the list of why this is happening. It's mental instability of creative people, which is not an outrageous comment. Musicians have it too.
Sure.
You've got people underpaid.
Yeah.
The pay structure in comics, is that going to change anytime soon? I don't know. People feeling respected, is that going to change? Probably not. Is the industry going to get stronger? Hopefully. So I don't know if any of those things are going to change it at all. Will companies start to produce guidelines and enforce them more? That might help. Or will there be social pressure for people to be like, hey, man, we all got off of Twitter. Didn't you hear? So, like, will people take it on themselves to just pull away and sort of pressure other people to get off of Twitter?
I think we'll see more of that. I think that's probably a very likely outcome. And I do think the companies step in. I think some bean counter somewhere in a company goes, hey, these people that work for us who are independent contractors, maybe we don't pay that much to.
Right.
They're creating $1 million IP. If we shelled out the money for a 2-week course and just some reasonable rep that they could talk to, we're protecting our investment. I have to believe that happens at some point.
Right. The thing is too, this is another perfect storm. In the last 2 years, we've had COVID, we've had the crazy election, whatever your side is on. We've had AT&T and Disney starting to throw their weight around in ways we have not seen yet. Right. We've got, because of COVID, shrinking market. Companies are pulling back on titles, 20%, whatever it is.
Yep.
Hopefully that'll bounce back because I do believe in comics. And then you've got all these sexual harassment, like quasi accusations floating around on Twitter all of a sudden. Like 6 things happened in the last 2 years. And if I'm a guy at AT&T, or I'll go Disney because I don't work for them. I'm a guy at Disney, and one of our books is written by Warren Ellis, and I don't know Warren. I don't know what happened. I don't know what's true, what's not. I'm just using his as an example. If I saw the Warren Ellis stuff hit the fan and saw that he had a Netflix show and saw that he was responsible for these like, I would be like, we need to get out in front of this, guys. Like, this comics, it's too important to not patrol this anymore. We need to correct this. And it's cheaper to be proactive about it than to deal with possible lawsuits later on. And the women who have been hurt, and some men, mostly women, we could easily save their emotional suffering if we do the right thing as well. Like, hello, it's like win-win if we just get out in front of this now. And I'm not sure that's, I mean, I hope that they address that more and more.
I think it comes. I think we did have that perfect storm, and I think to lump into that, you have this slow declining, death of retail. You have no coherent digital strategy in the U.S., so that's a big question mark where comics go. And you have a lot of these pieces all floating in. Big churn turnover. It's a natural 20-year cycle point in comics.
Of course. Yep.
It's a tough. I mean, all those things coming at you. I want to believe that with the election over, there's a new president. There's somebody in the comments who says, not yet, the votes are still being counted, but there's a new president at this point. I mean, history tells us. I'll tell you what, I'll come on and apologize if it gets overturned.
Me too.
There we go. Do that show. But I'm hoping that people at least start to settle down a little bit. I admit I'm surprised with the election now behind us and with the likely outcome being what it is. People are still very mad. Like the anger has not gone away yet.
Yeah.
I would have expected it to start to kind of shrink a little bit, but it's not.
Yeah. My hope is that, again, I'm a liberal, but my hope is that the reasonable centrist liberals can be more vocal and to pull the radical liberals back a little bit. A lot of, and friends, like people say, oh, your friends aren't really friends. So I use the word friends with lowercase f and uppercase. Like, you have like casual acquaintances in comics. I call them friends. And some of my friends have attacked me, and maybe they're not friends anymore, but I just conversationally, I still call them that. Anyway, a lot of my friends, I agree with them in spirit, but practically speaking, what they're saying is not workable. And I don't know, you've been trying your tactic for 4 years now, and it hasn't worked. At some point, you have to think about something new, like 70 million people voted for the guy you don't like. You can't just ignore that. People who grow your food love Trump. Yeah. You can't just ignore that. Like, it's a small group of KKK people. Like, it's a large, in their mind, if you want to call it a problem, and I'm not sure if I would say that, but if you want to call it a problem, like, the way to address this problem isn't to do what you're doing. It's to try to explain to people why it upset you, why it's not a good solution, why it's not democratic, why it's problematic, why it's dangerous, whatever. Like, I'm sorry, you do have to take the high road and do that. You can't just badger them like you feel badgered.
Yeah, and it does. I think it goes the other way as well, to be fair. I think
100%.
People on the right have to come to realize that not everyone who voted for Biden is some kind of crazy commie that wants to take all your money away. It is. It is. There are variations in all of this, and there, as you said, 70 million people voted for the other guy, whichever party you're on, plus.
Right.
And so we do not have a functional society if you just take out half. It just work. So pragmatically, we have to come to the table, and I hope cooler heads prevail.
Yeah. I moved out of New York 4 years ago, and I got out of the liberal bubble, so to speak. And we have a big house here. It's built in 1880. We have a lot of contractors. A lot of contractors are conservative, as you might expect. Some of them aren't. But I've woken up to hear people, dunking on Hillary Clinton while they're paving my driveway. The rock wall guy doesn't like what Biden said. It's just so funny, the conversations that I run into around my house. And I've had 20 to 30 people in the last few years that I've just bumped into on the way to working. And I like these people, and I've had drinks with them. I've shared some of my good booze with them. And I know that they, for whatever reason, they like Trump, or they used to like Trump. They don't anymore, whatever it is. And I realized, talking to my liberal friends, that they don't have anybody in their life who's a conservative. Like, they don't know anybody who voted for Trump, other than it's somebody at Thanksgiving and it's a family member that they hate or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not a Trump fan by any means, but I want to know what the hell liberals missed. Like, I want to know why I was so wrong about him getting elected. I want to know what Hillary did that abandoned them. Like, I want to fix these problems. And I've become like, all my conservative friends tell me I'm the one liberal that they like. And I feel like there's a ton of liberals like me that are just quiet, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that generally that's where I got into trouble on Twitter, was I tried to tap the brakes on my liberal friends, and it wasn't appreciated. And that's kind of why I decided to quit.
No, I mean, for the last year, there's no, and part of it's that, and part of it's just a mechanism of social media. It's like
Yeah.
you do not get attention by being reasonable. You get attention by being pissed. And
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I got a lot of attention for trying to be reasonable, and it
Yes.
wasn't. Yeah. But your point is taken, though.
Yeah. See, it turned on itself. Actually, it leads very nicely into this comic.
Hey, my favorite.
There you go.
Dude, I was a big Union fan. I love Union.
It was, as we mentioned before, I had forgotten this comic existed, which is embarrassing. And then I'm going to grab art for this page, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. This was fun. This was a fun comic. Like, whatever happened to you? Actually?
Wait, if he's a Wildstorm character, then that might mean DC owns him, which means I can use him in White Knight.
Yes, get him into White Knight. There you go.
I'm not sure it'll fit, but sure. Maybe it'll be a surprise villain for Superman or something at some point.
There you go. Yeah, you've got to. You should definitely do something with Union somehow. And really, like, put it into the comic somewhere. Like, even if it's on a background poster or something, we gotta.
Yeah, there's got to be big Union cult following out there. Maybe not. I don't know.
No, I'm sure there is. People will thumbs up the video for that. Just what's funny, the comic on the right is hilarious. I finally sat down and read that today. The Union was scheduled to come out with Empire, and it was delayed because of the pandemic, and they kind of canceled out of Empire, and they just launched it as part of King in Black. So now it's a King in Black story instead of an Empire story. I am absolutely convinced that they just redrew like 3 panels to change like a plant monster into a black goo monster.
Maybe, man. I've seen weirder things.
I've got to know. I've got to find somebody at Marvel who will come clean and let me know. But I'm convinced the comic just had some redraws and it's the same story. But anyway. You asked this question, and what do you think? You work in comics. Does Union come up at all? Do they talk about a union?
Yeah, it comes up in a very uneducated way. So you have a business degree, and I defer to your knowledge on this. So correct me if I'm wrong. Legally, you cannot start a new union. You have to join an old one, right?
Yes, with a star by it. So there's a lot of things that erode that statement, but generally speaking, yes. Okay,
so we would have to join, Hollywood storyboard union or something like that.
Yes, and they would have to do an offshoot for you and kind of incorporate and all the rest. Yeah,
right. So the talk of unions usually comes up by angry creators who are drunk, who are like, "Fuck it, we finally got to do this. We finally got to do this." And my thing is, it's kind of too late, because if you start demanding everyone makes $200 a page, they're just going to start hiring artists in China and South America who will work for much less. It's just too late to do that. Like back when the big two were both in New York and being local sort of important as far as the process, you had to hand deliver your pages. Yeah, a union might have made sense back then, but now it's just not going to work as far as I understand it.
The unions have to have leverage. And the big two in particular, and really this is a place where if the big two are not on board, then the whole concept of union gets weird very fast. But it is, they already have a very clear pipeline into other regions where they can get work cheap.
Yeah.
They know it. So, there really is no leverage.
Yeah.
I think comics needs something that is maybe less of a union and more of a tighter association, something where the agents can play a role as well. I mean, I think there's some kind of grouping that could occur, but
so the other question is, like, when people start ranting about unions, what is it they're wanting to get out of it? Protection? Like when they're late on a book and their editor annoys them, do they want a union rep to like deal with that problem? Are they annoyed that they're not paid enough? Are they annoyed they're not respected? Like, exactly what is it you're looking? Health insurance? Like, tell me what it is you want for a union to do to you, and they don't even have a good answer for that.
No, it really, I think you're right. I think a lot of people misunderstand, because I've been part of these drunken conversations.
They're amazing, by the way. They're always fun.
Oh yeah, it is always kind of funny, because you sit there and you're like, that's not how it works. And like, even if you like watched a legal show on Netflix,
I got trashed with Tony Harris once, and God bless him. I love his angry, white hot hatred, and like I love that stuff. But I don't remember a lot of what he said. But some of it I didn't quite follow. Some of it I did. But it was an amazing conversation. I've had many of those over the years. So I don't mean any disrespect to any creator that's lobbied for this. I just want to talk about the practicality of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a need. That's the thing. It's. I don't know if it's a need for a union, but there's a need for some kind of advocacy for health insurance and maybe better training and maybe some standardization of page rates. And
yeah,
I think there's a definite need for it. I'm with you. I don't think a union would accomplish that goal. It's got to come somewhere else.
Right.
The other problem is, I mean, you'd have some success probably with AT&T. Disney, though, is legendary at killing these.
Yeah. Disney went into like nursery schools, daycare, and like literally sued daycare in Florida to get Mickey Mouse off the walls.
Yeah.
No, like that's not a myth. That is a factual thing that happened in the 90s, correct?
It is absolutely a fact.
Yeah, like they don't give a shit about some of the public. Like they want good PR, but they're not afraid to scare a bunch of like 20-somethings into removing Mickey Mouse off the wall either.
It's a fact, not in the 90s. It's a fact 2 years ago. Like there's active lawsuits where Disney is insanely protective of their brand, which makes it, by the way, all the more insane that you see certain comics come out that just trash the brand. But that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Oh, Marvel Comics?
Yeah.
No. Really?
No, just what I mean by that is not a Mickey. I just mean there's a particular brand. Like they have gone out in the area I live here in the Pacific Northwest, and they've sued places that have images of Captain America and Spider-Man in daycare. At the same time, there is no problem with publishing comics where Captain America or Captain Marvel is drawn in a absolutely brand destroying way. Mm-hmm. That does not have anything. But anyway, I got off track. Something needs to happen. I do think something needs to happen, but it's got to start with leverage, and it's going to be really hard for that leverage to be obtained. I was curious to get your take on this. So
sure,
it's interesting seeing these comics here and just kind of what's gone on in the past. But right now, kind of the hot game, or what I hear a lot of people talk about is YA, and YA is where it's at, and YA is the big world. So how is that impacting you?
Well, I didn't know a lot about YA until I listened to you talk about YA.
Oh no.
I knew of Raina Telgemeier. I knew his name is Kazoo. He did a lot of stuff for Scholastic. He did what's his name? Asian guy, really nice. Whatever.
I know you're talking about.
It's killing me.
We're gonna get to it in about 5 minutes. It will just pop into one of us, and then we'll know. But like Dab Pilkey.
Amulet. You did Amulet.
Amulet. Yeah, Amulet. Yes, yeah. My daughter has signed books from him.
There you go. Great guy. Sorry, I flubbed out on his name.
Very.
So when I started hearing about the what YA was, I'm starting to think, I'm doing plot holes. This is book. It's crowdfunded. It could be all ages, but all ages and YA are not the same thing. I realized. I thought, I just won't have any swears in it. I'll have it celebrate reading, which is what the plot of Plot Holes is actually about. I thought, maybe I can just like pitch this to Scholastic or whatever, and maybe I still can. But then I went and bought a bunch of YA books and I read them, and I'm like, there's no way Plot Holes is YA. It's way too much talking. For YA to work, you need like a really lush Pixar level artist at times. You need a very bare minimum script. You need to really bank on imagination and not on plot. And there's a whole other way to approach YA. And I feel like what I see publishers do, not just Marvel and DC, is they made the mistake I make, where you just make it all ages, and it's not the same thing. Because my niece is 18 and she grew up reading comics, and it's just so fascinating. I said, "Why do you like Raina Telgemeier?" And she goes, "Well, I see myself in that book." Mm-hmm. And I go, "Okay, great. Would you read a YA about Harley Quinn?" And she goes, "No." Why? She goes, "Well, anything with Marvel or DC on it, I just assume is not going to be good YA." I'm like, "Okay, that's interesting." I'm like, "But you'll see a Marvel movie, you'll play a Marvel video game. What is it about Marvel dipping into YA that turns you off? Because there's something going on here that I don't know if anybody is investigating." And I don't know if you can help me understand it, Perch.
I don't know that I have the answer, other than I think kids have an interesting radar of detecting this stuff. I mean, my daughters like the Marvel movies, by and large, not all of them. They did not like Captain Marvel, but that's a video for another time. But they loved Ant-Man and the Wasp, for example, and they liked the Wasp, and they actually felt like that was the big female superhero to go follow and emulate and everything else. They love those movies. But every time I've tried to show them the YA content, whether it's IDW publishing it or Marvel or DC, it's an immediate turnoff. There's zero interest. And these are kids who absolutely, especially my older daughter, loves One Piece, loves My Hero Academia, consumes it like crazy, is driving me broke buying all that stuff. And yet they just, by default, it's the same exact experience you had. They look at this stuff and it's like, well, this is clearly a imitation. This is not right. This isn't real. So
look, I went into Chris's Comics. I'm in New England, and Chris's Comics is like it's 2 stores. It's not really a chain, but he's been around for decades. And I bumped into him at a few months ago, and he goes, I sell Raina Telgemeier up and down all day long. He puts it at the back of the shop, so kids have to walk past. It's like, when supermarkets bury the milk in the rear, you know what I mean? And he goes, I cannot move these Marvel books that are trying to compete with Raina Telgemeier. Like, the cover is not quite the same. The plot, I mean, whatever it is, like, these kids just aren't into it. And he cannot crack the code on why. And I had my niece there with me, and she's like, there's something about Marvel doing YA where the kids are wise to it now. It's like when Marvel started making movies and you saw the Marvel logo, a lot of people who don't even know what Marvel is eventually started to feel like the big, bright red Marvel logo meant quality. And now Marvel can put out fucking Ant-Man. And as long as people see the Marvel seal of approval, they know they're going to get a quality product. And kudos to Marvel for pulling this off. But in the reverse, something about Marvel being stamped on a YA is like automatic deal killer for my niece. And I don't know how that happened.
They never earned. I mean, so there's definitely people who have disliked the Marvel movies from the start, but generally speaking, most people who would come and they'd see Iron Man there, and they'd see the Avengers, and they'd see the kind of build up in Captain America, and they felt like there was some quality coming to the page, like they were trying to do something good, and it felt like there was some effort there. The YA stuff always comes across like we got the cheapest artist we could find to kind of emulate the style of somebody else you liked, but not doing it terribly well. It's not like they went and got like Brian O'Malley and said, you're going to do a book. They went and got other talent to do it. Maybe wonderful people, but all the same, it felt like a rerun. And it's kids can detect that. I think that people don't give kids enough credit of they've got a really good bullshit detector. Of this is not real.
Yeah. I think what YA is trying to do is they're trying to sell to the Oni comics crowd, like the San Francisco amateur, like underground style, hipster comics. That is not the same thing as what Scholastic is doing. It's a completely different type of story. Like it's not enough to try to do an Oni style book at Marvel. You have to rethink about the script, the talent, the marketing, the cover. You need a really broken down style in some ways. No more than 3 word balloons per page. Like, there's a format that's working, and you're not aware of what that even is. And that's kind of what annoys me. Is like, I'm not even paid to investigate this stuff, but I know why it's not working.
No, absolutely. I mean, I have heard firsthand like rants from folks who work at Marvel who look at Dab Pilkey and say, "But that art looks like shit." Like it's the most basic level of art. Our art's so much better than that. Why is he succeeding and we aren't?
Right.
It's like, because you're there, he's playing a completely different game than you.
You're not the customer, idiot. Like, your kid is the customer. Your kid likes Raina Telgemeier's stuff is broken down. Like, it's amazingly simple, and that's why it works.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. The Babysitter Club books and that kind of stuff. My daughters, they know exactly what that stuff is, and it's easy to see it on the page, but it is not the big two are producing.
Yeah. And I had my niece was like, one of her things was she needs to see herself in the book. And I go, so you need to see a female character? She's like, no, I need to see a female character that's around my age. And she doesn't care if the character is another race or what the gender is or the sexual preference. Like, she's not that woke, not yet. She just wants a character that's her age. It's the same, trials and tribulations as she is. So I started pitching her Harley Quinn YA ideas, and I won't go into them here, but I started to sort of figure out like what might actually reach someone like her. But even then, it's such an uphill battle because if you stamp Marvel Comics on it, it's just like, nope, it's not Raina Telgemeier, not interested.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's kind of the same effect that it's the same effect that the movies have had, but in reverse. It's the seal of approval for the movies makes
Exactly
quality. Here, the seal of approval means this is this is a copy.
Yeah, in a way, like maybe Marvel should just get a new label and just call it, Epic, and just make a like kiddie style version of the Epic logo and just fool kids. And like before you know it, but then in Marvel's heads, they're like, but Spider-Man, like kids will see Spider-Man. Like, yeah, but if you put Spider-Man in a YA, they won't read it. Like, I don't know why this happened, but this is what is happening, and you have not figured it out yet. And you're fighting it,
the market of who's going to be excited by Spider-Man just wants Spider-Man. You as a parent can kind of figure out, do I want the kid reading Spider-Man issue where he gets his neck snapped, or do I want to hand my kid Kraven's Last Hunt? But that's a problem for the parent. That's when any parents who would come into my shop and they'd want, the kid saw Spider-Man, want Spider-Man comics. Mm-hmm. The only times it worked is when they bought real Spider-Man comics. Whenever they went in and bought an IDW kind of say Spider-Man,
right?
I didn't see them again. They would just vanish off into the ether. I don't know where they went, but
right, yeah. So, question to put to you, and I think half of your audience will agree with this. Do you think the reason that Marvel, for example, because I have nothing bad to say about DC, but do you think the reason Marvel isn't getting it is because you have a bunch of liberal wokies in these positions and they don't have kids, so they're not seeing it?
I definitely think it's the lack of kids. I think that's a major factor, and I think it's and the other thing is there's just not enough money to take it very seriously. So
that's true. Yeah,
people are they're not getting paid too much, and so it's like, let's just do something out there. I've had several creators, and I know people who have many more than what I'm hearing, but I've heard from at least 5 or 6 people who have YA deals or getting YA deals, and they're very excited about money they're getting, and the money they're getting is awful money. Like it's just terrible. So it's like, well, okay, you're probably not going to do your research of what will land because it's just so cheap. I definitely think it's a lack of kids, and I think there's a lack of people who either understand kids or want to understand kids. And you know what? I think maybe some of there's a fixation on wanting to tell a coming of age story, and that's fine. That's one type of story. But that's not what Dad Pilkey is doing. Like Dogman is not a coming of age story. There's no, Dogman through puberty going on. And I think that's another thing, is like they're taking a niche of a YA story and they're going all in on that niche and much bigger world.
Yeah, I would love to meet Dad Pilkey and I have a bunch of questions for him. I just love to see where he lives or how much money he's making.
That guy is insanely loaded from
He's gotta be. He's gotta be. Yeah.
He prints so much money, and it's got to be just. I picture, and I'm sure it's not this way, but I picture this just happy guy. He comes out, he draws drawings, he goes and is in a giant swimming pool of money. He comes back out.
It's like Scrooge McDuck with a drawing table in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. There's like pictures of Captain Underpants on the walls, and it's just he's having a great.
No, he's embarrassing all of us. It's amazing and good for him. Yeah, no resentment at all. I think it's great.
I think that it could still be done, but I'm with you. I think Marvel and DC, for that matter, they should pull out Epic, or I don't know what the DC equivalent would be, but just like get a new logo going and just try it. But I would stay away from don't try and do Batman as a team like branch out.
So that's the thing. Like they tried to restart Vertigo 5 times in the last 5 years. And I think that the right idea would be, and I don't know what they're doing, I'm not an authority on this, but my opinion is we've tried a bunch of times. People are onto us. Let's just cool it for a bit. Let's give it 5 years, just radio silence. And then maybe, I don't know if we're doing this, then we'll come out with the new Sandman, or then we'll do Hellboy and people will get the nostalgia vibes. But I think there's a certain thing where if you try a thing too many times in a short period of time, people are onto you and they're just not open to it. You just have to cool it for a while, get off the radar, and then reintroduce it after some time has passed.
Yeah, I totally agree. You need to come back with some authenticity, that what you're doing is not just like this season's recycle of the same logo. There's a lot of people who I think would be all in on Vertigo and still very much enjoy that content, but you do need to take a break now and maybe even collect some really special ideas and go out to market.
Right. Yeah. So one more question I have for you before we go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you think it can ever be like it was back in 1991? Like Jim Lee X-Men, like pre-Image, answer however you want, of course, but do you think it could ever be, people that are complaining that it's not like the 90s, and I know that you have your qualms with that rationale.
Sure.
But do you think it could ever be like that again? And that includes the spectators market.
So I despite all the problems that came out of it, I desperately wish it would.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. And or the world would have to change so dramatically, because you have Marvel and DC on top. They have giant corporations on top of them. You're not going to see another kind of revolution of what happened at Marvel, where you had these big artists that became larger than life and were able to kind of parlay all this stuff. Marvel would never let that happen again. They wouldn't let it get close.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the problem. We need something. I mean, I've talked about this much before. We've talked about this before. We need whatever the newsstand 2.0. We need whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's some new digital market, some new something. We need something. And I say this as a comic shop owner. We need another exposure point to really kind of be able to build up the super hype that came out of this industry. It's very much in a funnel right now.
Yeah.
I would love it. I would love that ride, even though there's a very negative part to that ride in the later 90s. But the early, like 91, these comics selling, the stuff.
Yeah.
I remember I had boxes coming in from Diamond that had nothing but one copy in it. Like there's just one comic in this entire box.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast a while back, and remember that Image book, Vanguard?
Sure. Yeah.
It only sold 250,000 copies, so they canceled it because it wasn't selling enough.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ.
You can't even wrap your head around that now. I mean, there were, the big complaints at times with Diamond, and why some changes got made around kind of expiration dates, returnability, final order cutoff, those kinds of things, was people were getting stuck with like, oh, I've got 2,000 copies of Brigade that came in late, and I don't know what to do with them. And I just, there's not 1,000 copies of anything coming anywhere now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this would ever work, but if I worked at Marvel, I would be pushing to hire Eric Larson to do 4 issues of Spider-Man. And I hired Todd to do 4 issues of Venom. I would bend over backwards. I would apologize. I would suck their dicks if I had to. I would, whatever, like, just as a marketing scheme. And like, I know that they will take a pay cut, even if we pay them as much as we can afford. I know that they're not going to make as much as they do on their Image books. But think about the marketing spin. Think about the closure, whatever you want to call it. Like, just think about what a good thing that would do for the entire industry if you did it in a really fun, positive way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would ever happen. I don't know if Marvel would ever cough up the money that it would take, honestly.
I don't think they would. I don't think they'd want to admit that they need to. I mean, what's interesting about what you said there was that I think the bait for Todd would not be, hey, we're going to pay you a big page rate, although they would need to cough up a lot of money.
Right.
It would be more we're going to market this as like the reunion of the Beatles. We're going to market this huge and make this a major moment for the industry. Right. I think that would. I think that would get Larson. I don't even know how it would work with Jim Lee. That would be a whole.
That's for our next podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I'll bet Jim Lee would if somebody,
like in spirit, I think Jim would, but contractually, legally, I don't know if he can, honestly. Yeah. But spirit, if he was drunk, verbally, sure, I guess I would like to do that. But practically speaking, he's locked into some crazy stuff at DC. I don't know if he can. Todd and Eric are a different story.
Yeah, with Todd, like, why not that would be the way to do it. And you just really frame it as, this will be a mega moment for the industry. It's, we're not going to pretend that there's, which doesn't exist. We're just going to be out with it.
Yeah. And it's funny. I did a podcast where I interviewed Todd for 2 hours, and the guy that recorded us lost the stream or lost the file. he was like a Navy SEAL, retired. He's got a lot of connections because he was friends with Mark Millar and a lot of my friends, so people vouched for him. And I don't know if the video failed or this audio failed. I don't know why this podcast hasn't been released yet, but I interviewed Todd because I had a bunch of questions for Todd that no one ever asked him that I wanted to ask him, because I feel like a kinship with him because no one else is like hawkish about business in this industry except for him. And people think he's an asshole, but he's not. And I get that same accusation and I'm like, I'm not an asshole. I just don't want to waste my time. Like, I want everyone to make money. And I feel like when you're dealing with a bunch of people that don't have business degrees, you just come across like an asshole. And then, they see how big your house is. And then, it's strike three. Anyway, so I said to Todd, he was telling me and he said this in another interview, so I'm not revealing anything that Todd wouldn't appreciate or take offense to. He was making something like 150 to 200 to 250, whatever it was, below $300 a page for a comic that was selling millions back in the late 80s, early 90s. And he asked for a raise and they said no. And I feel like Todd's anger basically created Image. Like, he was a domino that fell, that took the other dominoes, and he's on this fuck you war for 30 years now, and he's won in a lot of ways, right?
He absolutely did, yeah.
And I said to him, what if when Todd said, hey, it's 1998, my issue sold a bunch, I created Venom for you, you guys didn't pay me anything. Do you think maybe I could have like $50 more a page? If they had just said yes, maybe they would have avoided Image existing in the like, get in your time machine in your DeLorean and go back in time. Like, imagine if they had just coughed up another $50 a page. They might have saved themselves the rage that is Todd McFarlane for 30 years.
I mean, I definitely, he was the ringleader to some extent. If they would have doubled the page rates of all these guys, they'd be, I don't know if they'd still be there today, but none of it would have happened.
Yeah. They could have at least bought themselves another 2 years. Like, they might have eventually gone off and created Image, period, to their credit. But you could have at least, if you had just played the game a little bit more and lowered your ego down. But Marvel has this culture that's been still there for decades, and it's something you and I were talking about offline. But I don't know when it started or why or how, but it definitely has hurt them in the wallet.
It has. It's always been there, and it is very friendly. It fits Disney very well because Disney also has a bit of that culture, and so if anything, it's going to go down and harden. But it's crazy to think about that it was a moment in time, and even if it would have delayed it, I don't think all 6 of them would have jumped. I think the 2 years, things would have shifted and everything else. But I mean, so many dominoes fell all at once. They moved. The Toy Biz acquisition, all these, the Marvel's financial troubles, exiting Stage Right, all this stuff.
The way to do this too is you call up Todd and you're like, hey, I apologize on behalf of what Marvel did. We want to do some business with you. We think there's an opportunity here. We want you to draw 4 issues of Venom. We're willing to give you the rights to make McFarlane Toys Venom figures. Stuff that Todd would love to do. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't talked to him about this at all. So if I'm out of line, I apologize. But like, there's got to be some assets that they can trade to get this to happen. But with them, like, none of the other hands are talking to any of the other hands, and no one even knows how to go about pulling this deal off. So it's just not going to happen, which is frustrating because in theory it could. Because I would love to see Todd do more Venom comics, even if he wouldn't get paid as much per page. There's so much money to be made and so much excitement to be had about it.
Everybody would. I mean, they shelled out some big money for J.J. Abrams and Son to do the limited series. They kind of just, they marketed one issue.
The book that we're all still reading.
Exactly. I finally thought that's coming out next Wednesday. Finally, it's concluding. It's been such a journey to get here. But
what issue is it? Sorry, how many did it have?
I believe it's 5. I think this is issue 5, and this is the conclusion. Finally,
the only thing I've heard about it is you complaining about their lack of marketing.
I should. I need to do more positives, but no, it is. It's like you paid all the money, and then you advertised one issue, and then it just vanished completely. But anyway, crazy stuff. So, Sean, thank you so much. We have to do this again.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for humoring me, and I'm always glad to come in and chat with you.
Not humor. You're doing me a favor. I'm hoping the pandemic closes down. The next time we do this, we're in person and we're drinking. Yeah, face to face. We should definitely do a live Sean and Perch podcast at some point. 100%. We have to do it. Hey, well, thank you very much. All the people who listen, put up with us. Thank you, and I'll see you.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. Thank you, customers. Thank you. I'm not trying to love bomb anybody, but thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.